Was unquestionably the best writer of history in Western Canada that we ever produced. The whole of the Canadian West is the beneficiary. That's how the Alberta Report described renowned Alberta writer and social historian James H. Gray. His incredible life and accomplishments are chronicled in the new biography, How the West Was Written. It's one social historian's look at the life of another, and author Brian Brennan is here today. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You talk about him as Jimmy Gray, of course, throughout the book. He was quite a character. At what point did you realize you wanted to write this story about his life?
Well, I had visited his story before, Jocelyn. I'd written about him actually after he died in 1998. I'd written about him for the newspaper, and he struck me as being an interesting rogue at that point. And then I wrote about him again in short form in my first book, Building a Province. And that was one story that I wanted to get back to. I thought this life I want to deal with in greater detail.
Well, no doubt. For those who don't know, he was a journalist. He comes from Manitoba, but became an Albertan, especially to Albertans who embraced him, right?
Yes, he did.
He juiced up the history of the prairies, and I don't mean that he added to it or didn't tell the true story. In fact, he told the really true story. He looked at it differently. He looked at things like sex and booze.
That's right. Well, the thing was that he said that if you were to believe all the histories of the West that had ever been written, you get the impression that the West was settled by Vestal virgins and monks and eunuchs.
Puritans.
Well, exactly. And so he thought, there's got to be more to the story than this. Like, these were young guys who came out to build the railway, and then they were homesteading. Like, what did they do for entertainment? And then when he was researching another book, actually it was an autobiographical book that he wrote called The Boy from Winnipeg, he discovered that there was an officially sanctioned red light district in Winnipeg around the time that he was growing up.
Right.
And then when he talked about that to his pals in the Winnipeg Press Club, they said, oh, there was a red light district in Edmonton, there was one in Lethbridge, there was one in Moose Jaw, there was one in Calgary.
One in Calgary,
there was
that's
one in
right.
Calgary. In fact, where the Calgary Herald building is now located, that was our red light district, if you can believe it.
But a lot of people, even in the area, didn't know that was the red light district.
Yeah, in fact, one of the residents thought there was some kind of a girls' college located in that area.
Yeah, well, it was some kind of a girls' college, that's for sure. Of course, we're seeing some of the archival photos that you include in the book. Where did you get the pictures from?
These were from the family, actually.
Really? Yeah. Very nice, because they really give a glimpse into what was going on in his life at the time. You know, he wrote about the KKK in Canada.
Yes.
A story that I think even many Canadians aren't aware of. They'd driven out of the U.S., right?
That's right. And in fact, what they did was they kind of allied themselves with the Orange Lodge and officially they were sort of members of the Orange Lodge. But in reality, I mean, it was the same racist organization that had lost credibility in the United States. And incredibly, they received a license, actually, when they got to Alberta, to operate as a charitable society. And nobody bothered to look at the letters patent to discover what exactly this organization does.
And where it came from.
Yes, exactly.
Was it just that nobody else was willing to write about these topics? Is that what made Gray's work so impressive?
Well, I think it was the fact that the professional historians had looked at the obvious things. They looked at the big picture situation, they looked at the politics, they looked at the economics, they looked at those kinds of developments. Nobody had ever actually looked at the social aspects of history. I mean, Gray was not interested in political movements. He was not interested in great big economic developments, but he was interested in how these events impacted on the ordinary individual.
On real people.
So it was what you would call back fence history. The stories that you tell to your neighbor over the back fence. I mean, that was the kind of history that interested him.
Sadly, you mentioned he died in 1998. He had a stroke and he lost his eyesight not long before his death. He started losing his eyesight basically when he was in his 80s. And although he put up a good front, that was a real tragedy for him because, of course, he couldn't write anymore. And for a writer to lose his or her eyesight is the equivalent of a musician losing their hearing. So it was terribly difficult for him. Very difficult. Just a few seconds. Can I ask you why you dedicate it to his children, Pat, Alan, and Linda? Because they were very helpful to me when I was researching the book. They told me all the sort of the inside stories that I wouldn't have found elsewhere, and so I thought they deserved the tribute. They must be pleased with the results. Oh, they are very pleased, I think. Very nice. Thank you so much, Brian, for coming in. Really appreciate it. The book, once again, is How the West Was Written, The Life and Times of James H. Gray. And by the way, Brian will be reading and signing from the book December 2nd at the Fish Creek Library, right? That's right. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you. Just ahead.